Morning, everyone. Welcome to the March California webinar. We are looking to have our next webinar next month on April 13th. April 13th, Monday. That will be after Easter. I think Easter's early this year, too. Maybe April 5th or something like that is Easter this year. So we'll be meeting again on April 13th. Mark your calendars. We just finished our federal webinar, rather large federal webinar. Not too much to report this month. Obviously, February is a big one because we're all coming back from SHOT. My brother Chris and I were able to go out to Phoenix again this year, attend the Sports Inc. show. So it was good to see everyone out there that we saw. And it's always good to, having that SHOT show and Sports Inc. show pretty much back-to-back weeks. We get to see a lot of people at the beginning of the year. Chris and I love that. This week or this month, we have Matt with us from Chuck Michel's office, as per usual. And the only things to report on the federal side were that inspections have been up around the country. We have not seen so much on ATF in California or even DOJ. I haven't heard much from DOJ at all. But the inspections are up, and as the weather gets nicer, obviously the inspections, there will continue to be an uptick on the inspections. But we have not encountered many issues. But mainly, we always want to remind you folks that if you do have ATF in there, they are inspecting you, and they do try and give you some sort of knowledge or say that you're doing something wrong. Ask them where in the regulations or where in an open letter to FFLs, what they're asking you to do is stated. You always want to see something in writing from them. Otherwise, it's just their opinion. That we don't roll on people's opinions. We roll on the federal rules and regulations and the open letters to the FFLs. So if you do have an inspection starting, please make sure you let us know so that we can check in on you daily and see how things are going. And we also want to remind everyone that we have been placing calls. If you have a credit card with FFLGuard that pays monthly, please make sure that your credit card is not expiring soon. Or if you've closed your bank account and you're on the Chax system with us, please make sure you let us know if your bank account or your credit card information or expiration date have changed. That's really what a bulk of the calls have been for the past couple months are the expiring credit cards. So please, if you have a card on file with us, just take a look at it and make sure it's not expiring anytime soon. With that being said, I'm going to hand it off to Matt Cubeiro so he can give us all things California. Floor is yours, Matt.
Thank you very much. So a couple things. So last time I was on the call, my mic had issues, so I apologize for that. My mic should be working fine from what I understand now. So,
yes, sir.
With that being said, I'll go over briefly what I was going to go over last time, just so you guys have some general information. But then also I'm going to go over, there's a lot of regulatory actions that DOJ has been taking lately that I'll touch base on. But really the biggest question last month, and I get not really question, but issue, let's just say, was the issue of license renewals with the California Department of Justice. That was causing a lot of dealers various types of headaches, in particular in the sense that if you had your license lapse during the period in which you were attempting to get it renewed, you would potentially lose access to DES, and then, of course, be unable to process any transactions. This has been an ongoing issue and one that kind of rears its ugly head every year, it seems. And so we're working with the CRPA to try and get a legislative solution passed and adopted here at some point to try and address this issue moving forward. In the meantime, you as a dealer, if you were subject to this issue, you would potentially have civil cause of action against DOJ for things like lost sales, things like that, potentially, which you're always welcome to pursue, and I can talk with you a little bit more about if that's something that you're interested in. That being said, there's been, like I said, a lot of changes, proposed changes really from DOJ concerning various aspects of the existing regulations. The one that I was going to really highlight last month was this change to the uh, mandatory dealer training for employees. You all should have gotten a notice through DES concerning SB 241, Dealer Employee Training Bulletin, as it was called. I'll be sure to pass that around to make sure that you get a copy of that if you have not. The key thing to understand here is that the compliance period for dealers and their employees begins July 1st this year, and it runs until June 30th, 2027, at which point beginning July 1st next year, is when all of your employees are supposed to be in compliance with the required training. What DOJ has done, however, is they've allowed you early access to the training program, so you can take a look at what's involved, things like that. From my understanding, from what I've seen, the questions are pretty self-explanatory. Most of the dealers that I'm aware of shouldn't have any issues, either themselves or their employees, passing the required training. I think there was one question, from what I recall, speaking with another dealer, that was kind of questionable, and the answer wasn't exactly correct. But nonetheless, that shouldn't affect your ability to, of course, get a passing score, so to speak. So, nonetheless, we'll be addressing that one question with DOJ, but nonetheless, be aware that that will begin starting July 1st. So don't try and comply with the requirements just yet. But if you wanted to, you could take a look at what DOJ has posted as far as the training is required. Another change that has come up recently through an emergency regulatory process is the changes regarding DMV licenses. What DOJ is doing here is they are effectively amending the existing regulations concerning the requirement to swipe a person's driver's license, which is now, thanks to recent changes at the California DMV, as far as the actual design of a California driver's license, will be obsolete, because most of the new driver's licenses that will be issued moving forward will not even have a magnetic strip anymore. And so in those cases, what DOJ is doing is they've adopted a regulation that will allow you, instead of swiping the driver's license, to instead just retain a photocopy of the actual license as part of a sale through DES or something like that. That is a proposed regulatory change via an emergency regulatory process. I do not have any information on when that will actually take effect, but nonetheless, be aware that that will be taking effect here relatively soon. As far as like day-to-day operational impacts, it shouldn't really change much unless you start running into those new forms of ID that the California DMV is going to be issuing. As far as other regulatory proposals, there are 4 sort of main ones, all of which are still pending, that have not yet been finalized. The first one, the civil fines for dealers, which has been part of a recent change legislatively, has to do with whether or not, if a dealer is engaged in some sort of activity that constitutes a violation of various California law or penal code or regulation or whatnot, this regulatory proposal will impose actual civil fines for those violations, usually as a result of an inspection or some other thing. So the comment period for that has ended. I raised this with you guys previously, so we're just still waiting for DOJ to respond to the public comments that it's received. So at this point in time, that could take however long DOJ takes for that. I would imagine, given all of the other budgetary issues and staffing issues at DOJ, it's probably still going to take some time for them to actually finalize that. But nonetheless, we'll be sure to inform you guys when and if that actually gets finalized. There's also sort of a similar change regarding gun show inspections that doesn't really actually impact sort of, I would say, day-to-day operations of a dealer. DOJ is adopting regulations concerning gun shows on how they will actually be conducting inspections while gun shows are in operation. Again, that's not something that's necessarily going to affect you as a dealer. Just be aware that that is a regulatory proposal that is pending. And of course, we don't have any information yet as far as when DOJ is actually going to adopt that. There's also been a couple other changes that will not directly impact dealers in any way, but nonetheless are still DOJ regulatory proposals that you should be aware of. The first one, DOJ is proposing a form to adopt concerning loan acknowledgments. And so I don't really see a lot of loans get processed or conducted through dealers to begin with. But nonetheless, there is a process for a loan to be conducted in a sort of a more of a private party setting in California. This form is basically just acknowledging the requirements. So when somebody actually conducts a loan in this fashion, they have to fill out this form and whatnot. And so again, it doesn't really affect day-to-day operations here, but it is a open public comment period. So if you want to comment on it, we'll be sending the link around. The pending period will close on March 31st, so the end of this month. And then lastly, DOJ is seemingly focusing, let's just say, on transfers involving law enforcement firearms, particularly off-roster handguns, to non-exempt individuals. They seem to really want to be cracking down on this to some extent. So they have, of course, proposed various regulatory changes on top of the regulatory changes that are currently pending. You all should have received a bulletin through DES concerning peace officer exemptions and whatnot that kind of alludes to these requirements. But again, the problem is that the language of the bulletin itself and these regulations are limited by the statute in the sense that there really isn't something that you as a dealer are required or obligated to be doing when it comes to processing private party transfers, unless you're expressly told that, for example, the individual is a law enforcement officer, they acquired the gun through a law enforcement exception, and are transferring it now to a non-exempt individual. In which case, unless you're actually presented with that information ahead of time, there really isn't anything that you can do to, say, stop a private party transaction from taking place through the DES system. And so DOJ is looking at ways, it seems, to try and prevent these types of transactions from happening, even though they still obviously do happen, and there's really not much that DOJ can do about it outside of a full statutory change on top of the regulations. So just something to be aware of. Again, we'll be sending out all of these links to you guys through FFLGuard. So if you guys have questions on any of it, I'd encourage you to take a closer look at some of the regulatory proposals as well as the bulletins if you have not already. With that said, I believe Chuck came on the call. I'll pass it over to Chuck if you wanted to talk about some of the litigation and other issues that are going on.
Yeah, I'll start with the big one, which is Duncan. It was not denied today. Duncan is the challenge to the magazine capacity limitation ban on possession of or sale or importation or anything else with magazines that hold over 10 rounds. That's been continued several times by the Supreme Court. They had a conference on Friday. They did not decide whether to take the case or not, which means that we'll get something later today, probably rescheduling the conference. It's generally not a good sign when they reschedule conferences. This reschedule a decision on whether to grant certiorari this many times. But interestingly enough, the DC Circuit Court of Appeal last week struck down a magazine capacity limitation statute in the District of Columbia, which creates a circuit split, which is one of the biggest reasons why the Supreme Court does take a case. So that's a good sign. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll take it, but there is now a clear circuit split, and so the odds of them taking it are back up again. So we'll see. They'll probably have another conference this Friday on Duncan, and then we'll be looking for orders next Monday on whether or not they've taken it. That's a big, high-stakes case, been going on since 2017. So obviously, there's a lot of money invested in that case, and obviously, we want that law struck down, and they could use that case as an opportunity to really clarify what the test is in a hardware case and kind of give us a roadmap for an AR-15's so-called assault weapon type challenge, which there are several of those cases pending too. So there's several hardware cases pending. So we just got to keep an eye on them. Meantime, Rhodey, the ammunition background check challenge, which we won at the 3-judge panel, is now up for review in the en banc. There is going to be a hearing in a couple of weeks in front of the en banc panel. So we'll see what happens there. If we lose, we will be asking the Supreme Court to take that one too. So all my digits are crossed on Rhodey. Meanwhile, we had oral argument in the the mandatory videotaping of firearm purchases in the FFL's storefront. I think that they are going to strike down at least part of that law, the audio portion, if not the whole thing, or at least limit the video portion. So I'm hopeful about a mostly positive ruling in that case coming out of the Ninth Circuit. And I think those are the three big ones that we've got going forward right now. We are still challenging jurisdictions for their CCW processing systems that take too long or cost too much. We have one against Santa Clara right now. We are looking for plaintiffs, and if anyone knows any, send them our way, to challenge the entire CCW process as overly burdensome, too expensive, and takes too long. Even the 120-day statutory maximum for a agency to process applications is probably unconstitutionally too long, given how fast other states can do it. So that's our big lawsuit that we're getting ready to file, which we will be promoting and trying to raise some money to be able to afford. But meantime, everybody who's an FFL in the state of California really ought to be doing what you can to sell memberships to CRPA so we can raise money to keep filing these lawsuits. And you get a commission on it. Like a lot of the big retailers are CRPA recruiters, and when you sell a membership, you get something. So reach out to CRPA for more information on that. You know, Kevin Small has been on before and talked about that. I think that's about all I got on lawsuits right now.
Well, we appreciate you boys out there in California. You guys are an excellent resource for us and many people across your state there. So we thank you guys for everything you do. And like we said before, our next webinar round will be on April 13th, Monday, April 13th, tax week. So also want to remind everyone, if you have a manufacturer's license, your AMFR report is due on April 1st. And also keep an eye out and let us know if any inspections begin out there. Like we said, California has been a little too quiet. We haven't heard from ATF or DOJ out there as far as inspections are concerned. Other than that, if you have any questions, please reach out to the help desk. Matt is always on top of things there and has been keeping the responses rolling. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Chuck.
All right. Thank you, guys.